I'll call our regular monthly meeting to order. Let us all stand for the invocation and pledge to the flag.
Before we pray this morning, let's have a moment of silence for all our military men and women that gave their life that we could have the freedom to celebrate July the 4th. Now, Father, we're so thankful that we do live in the United States where we have the freedom, God, to disagree. We have the freedom to say the things we want to, Lord, when we shouldn't. But, God, we thank you so much that we live here in this country where we do have freedom. Just be with us as we go through this meeting today, because each of us have freedom to express our thoughts. Just be with us, be with each one of us in the audience, Lord, and keep us close to you in your precious name. Amen.
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 Would you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. All of you received the minutes of our regular meeting and our recess meeting. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Outlaw,
Second.
second by Commissioner Richardson. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
And opposers, say aye. No. Motion carried. There are no one signed up for public comment, so we'll move on to our regular agenda.
Good morning.
Morning.
Check to be sure I've got the right folder up here. Thanks, okay. This morning, we are scheduled to have a public hearing for a UDO amendment and that regards private landing strips in order to allow those in an R40 single-family residential district with a special use permit and be subject to specific dimensional requirements. And also, there's a possibility of considering of any requirements that are added into the ordinance today as a result of the application might also be applied to the A1 district if the commissioners so desire. The UDO currently allows the development of private landing strips and flying fields in A1 agricultural, O&I, office and institutional, and GC general commercial, and also the PI planned industrial zoning districts. All of those require a special use permit by the Board of Adjustment. And the only requirements currently are that the landing strip or flying field are located at least 200 feet away from the nearest residence or residentially zoned lot. The order does consider commercial airports like Rocky Mount Wilson Airport in a separate category as a general aviation, and so we're not talking about that kind of airstrip. Mr. Thomas Troyer is the applicant. He's a pilot who wishes to establish a private landing strip at his residence. He is in an R40 single-family zoning district, and because landing strips are not currently permitted, he's coordinated with our office in order to try to bring this amendment forward. If you turn to the proposed amendment section, I can kind of walk through and highlight those changes, or what's contained in it, in the proposed changes. Obviously, the first thing would be in the zoning district required to add R40 to the zoning districts that would allow a private landing strip or flying field. We also wanted to add the word private into the designation, just to make it clear that we're not talking about commercial airports or a larger general aviation airport. Section B in the document are the general requirements. I would mention that during the course of meeting with the TRC and with the planning board, particularly the TRC, we talked with the local pilot, Charles Mullen, who referred us after a meeting to an inspector with the NCDOT Aviation Division, who has some responsibility for grass strips and these smaller private landing strips. We also researched some other counties and looked for ones that had ordinances that distinguished between general aviation airports and private landing strips. And what we found, 3 in Rockingham County, Surrey County, and Vance County. So we looked at those requirements. And also we had at the local level in the TRC an interest certainly in assuring some reasonable distance from homes, particularly at either end of the landing strip where you'd be coming in and taking off. I'm thinking that homes that were located in that path might have a little more intrusion or a little more need for protection or distance from the landing field. And the final thing we looked at was considering if the more residential nature of an R40 district warranted some additional regulation that in order to try to keep a landing strip in the more rural areas so it's looked more like an A1. As you know, a lot of the southern part of the county is zoned R40, but when you drive through it, it looks a lot like A1 areas more than a lot of more suburban kind of residentially zoned or residentially developed into subdivisions. So the idea behind that was to kind of look towards whether if we were going to add residential districts in, we tried to make them look more like the A1 parts of those districts and not something that was more developed. So those were the inputs that we had going into it, the discussions. And I would mention, that's kind of where we were coming from. The general requirement that, if I can just run through these, the applicant submit a scaled site plan depicting the proposed location and dimensions of the landing strip, as well as any relevant required separation distances. All of our special use permits actually require a site plan, but this was just making that a little bit more specific to this one, that the site plan needed to include those separation distances that are required by the ordinance. The second one and the third one are a little bit related. It says number 2 says the use of the landing strip shall be limited to the property owner and the authorized guests only. And number 3 was added by the planning board at their meeting, said that the landing strip shall not be used commercially by any aircraft not owned by the property owner. And the reason that property owner one came out in the planning board was in part because if the owner had like a crop dusting business or something like that they wanted to operate on their strip, the idea was that was that might be an okay thing to do, but not to have them build additional hangars or whatever and store other people's planes there or hangar other people's planes that were not his. That was deemed to be more of a commercial activity and not so much a personal or a local strip. Number 4 and number 5 are related to information that we got from the inspector at the aviation division at NCDOT. And number 4 says that basically prior to operating in the landing strip, the applicant should submit something to the office as part of their application, excuse me, or prior to operating the landing strip, would submit something to the office that basically indicates to us that they've been in contact with the state's aware of the landing strip being starting up, and that it meets their requirements. And so that typically, particularly number 4, is very similar to how we handle sedimentation and erosion control in developments, which is that we simply require them to give us a letter of receipt at the beginning that the state has received their sedimentation erosion control application, and they're processing it through the state's process because they have authority over that process. So that's what we were getting at for number 4, was mostly just to be sure that the applicant had been in contact with the authorities at the aviation division. Number 5 says there's a minimum distance of 500 feet between the ends of the landing strip and the nearest public road right-of-way, and 150 feet between the sides of the landing strip and the right-of-way. That reflects some of the basic criteria that are in the state's permitting review for local landing strips or grass landing strips. That one possibly could be omitted because it would be, from ours, it would be considered in the state's review, and that's their requirement. We added it or discussed adding it in here to alert the applicant in the early stages that was going to be, or those distances are going to be required. Number 6 is there should be no existing off-site residences within a 500-foot distance extending in a straight line from either end of the landing strip. And again, that's what we talked about. I mentioned earlier we were concerned about the distances on the ends more than the distances away on the side necessarily. And that was something that we found a lot in the other ordinances as well, an increased distance on the ends of the landing strip or the runway. And then no illumination of the landing strip shall be permitted. The idea behind that was it would limit the flights to daylight hours as best we could. And those general requirements were conceived or were recommended to be general requirements for all landing strips going forward, not just the ones in the R40, so they would be applicable to any of the districts. The dimensional requirements in section C, that's just a clarification. That 200-foot distance between any residence or residentially zoned lot exists in the ordinance now. I'll take that back. There is one change, which it specifies the nearest off-site residence. Currently, it would have to be 200 feet from a residence that's on the subject property as well. Our thought was that if the owner of the landing strip didn't care if it buzzed his house or was closer to his house, then we were primarily concerned with off-site residences that weren't part of the operation itself. Okay? And then the last section, Section D, I have a little bit of an epiphany about, but this was the section that we were trying to get at keeping the landing strips in areas that are more rural in nature. And so these items were developed, or these dimensional requirements were developed in order to try to maintain that, that more rural character for the landing strips. And so it has to do with the sizes and the acreages of contiguous lots and lots with lots in the immediate area around the landing strip. After the planning board meeting, I will confess that I had a bit of an epiphany, which was that in 1999 or so, when the UDO was adopted, and this section on private landing strips was put in the A1 zoning district. It was allowed in the A1 zoning district. At that time, the A1 zoning minimum lot size was actually 30,000 square feet, which would have allowed more dense development around it than a standard R40 would allow now. Does that make sense? We got that? Okay. So we, in putting forward these dimensional requirements in trying to keep the landing strips in a more rural part, in the more rural part of an R40 district and kind of away from where subdivisions might be more likely to be developed. It's a little bit actually more restrictive than the original landing strip regulations were when they were adopted in the UDO at 30,000 square feet. So, does anybody have any questions right off about any of those parts before I go further? Okay.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
are you allowed to build a hangar? In a
You- I
rural
ha-
strip, a landing strip?
A hangar would have to go under the accessory building requirements, so it would meet the setbacks, but it could be allowed, a hangar could be allowed within the separation distance, from a house. But it would have to meet the setbacks for the building construction.
What about a buffer?
A buffer?
Buffer, yeah.
There's
I know
not a-
I've seen one down in the southern part of the county. It was each side of it. I don't know where it's in operation now or not, but I know it used to be. It had woods on both sides of it, kind of nice long strip.
It-
And it was owned by one family and just for his own airplane. And he did not have a hangar.
Buffer, in terms of a vegetative buffer, is not currently required for any of the districts that we have. We didn't add one in. I think the primary intrusion, I would guess, in the neighborhood is more likely to be the noise of the takeoff and landing more so than the visual aspect of a grass field for the most part. I think it's just long and grassed or long and flat more than a visual problem. But we did not put one in. The board certainly could add that if they wanted to, if they felt like that was necessary.
I guess it depends on the type of plane you own that would determine how much noise it's going to make, or some of them are very noisy and some are not.
Right. I think that we did not put anything in the ordinance or make any suggestions related to the size or the type of the plane, because we frankly don't know that much about planes and don't want to be in charge of monitoring whether or not somebody buys or sells one. And that would be something that would be difficult to enforce. But that was the thinking behind that. In terms of consistency with the land development plan, the Board of Commissioners has previously determined that private landing strips are an acceptable permitted use in Nash County, subject to certain specific requirements, and that private landing strips are reserved for very small-scale use, and they don't meet the criteria for a general aviation airport. The decision to amend the ordinances or to keep it the way they are would both be considered consistent with the land development plan. The TRC considered the proposed amendment at a number of meetings. In April, in May, and in June, and then unanimously recommended approval of the proposed changes. I don't want you to think that it was a huge discussion that required 3 meetings worth of discussion with the TRC. The applicant was out of town, and so when we had to communicate, you know, when we had a question come up, it wasn't something we could resolve very simply, and so we just extended that discussion. The Planning Board considered the proposed amendment to the 2006 Land Development Plan, I'm sorry, to the UDO. Sorry about that. That should say UDO. Sorry about that. On June 20th, and they recommended approval in a 6-to-1 vote. The only other thing that I would mention, that I had to mention related to this is I'm only aware of one active landing strip in Nash County right now and it's not in our jurisdiction. It's actually in Red Oak's jurisdiction. I'm not sure where the one you are referring to, Mr. Billfield.
Down in Stanhope area.
But there is one in Red Oak, and it's not in our jurisdiction, but I'm not aware of any complaints or anything that they've had related to that. And there are some residences near that airstrip. And the other thing would be, we typically do not get complaints about noise or concerns from the subdivision that's even just at the end of the runway on 97, right there at the airport, at Rocky Mount Wilson Airport. We've not received noise complaints or anything from those people either.
Now, usually they're not used that much, just a family.
Right.
They're not used that much.
These are intended for a small-scale use. This would give you an idea of what it might look like. This is, of course, a rectangular piece, which is the easiest kind to deal with, the easiest kind to look at. And the way that the dimensional requirements are set up in the amendment, in this lot, you can see that the distances are longer. This distance is longer. Of course, there is a house on the front of this in this example. But there's a road here, so it would be required to be 500 feet away from that road, and that would be a DOT requirement. You'd get that in that permit. And then there's a wider setback. So in a pretty large piece of property, there is a width for enough space for a landing strip, but it would tend to be towards the center of the property unless you had a very large site.
Mr. Chairman,
Any questions?
yeah, I got a few, if I may, Ms.
sure.
Dixon. Is our applicant with us today?
He is?
Okay, thank you. I don't see anything that will require a residence being on the property at the time the landing strip is approved. Was that addressed? In other words, could a person own an R40 lot out in the county and just go put a landing strip on it without living there?
It does not require that the residents be on premises.
Should
That
we
would be-
require that?
That would certainly contain, I think that would, what we typically do when we have that kind of situation, it's an excellent suggestion, is the idea is that the burden of having it there is also borne by the owner's family, and so I think that's certainly a reasonable, I think
In
that's a
this
very
case,
reasonable.
does the
idea.
residents have a home there?
It does.
The applicant, I mean.
The applicant's specific situation
Okay.
does.
All right, because I
But,
certainly don't want to ask
it-
anything that's going to prevent what we're trying to do here.
Right, but the current ordinance, the way we structured it, does not require it to be on the person's residential property.
Don't we have some instances in our LDC, maybe a kennel will require an on-site residence, or do we have that anywhere?
But I think I think you hit it right on the head. I think the kennel, that's typically treated, I think in a kennel, that's a commercial area.
Right.
That actually requires commercial zoning, and so that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But in a residential area, in this case, the idea behind this is that, and I think maybe I just overlooked the idea that we weren't actually requiring the residents to be on site or adjacent, maybe.
Yeah.
Was that the landing strip, if it were to be used in something like a crop dusting or some minor commercial that was related to the ownership, then it would actually be like an accessory use or something to the owner, or an RFO or something like
Right.
that.
Well, we as a board can address that maybe after the public hearing, if there's any interest in
Sure.
that. It's just, I was just really wondering if it came up during the planning board process.
It did
Apparently
not,
did
but
not.
certainly a suggestion to be considered if you like.
You mentioned the word crop dusting, and which triggered a little bit of concern to me about the amount of use of something like this. So you don't have anything that will prevent a commercial operation at these in an R40 zone, even including crop dusting, which could well be utilized very frequently in certain times of the year. Is
It
that
does
correct?
not. It does not. The thought was that over the most of the time, and certainly throughout most of the period that commercial activities, other than the owner, we're not going to be that intense. I guess if the owner was doing airplane rides,
Well, that'd be another
or
example.
something like that,
Yeah. Did that come up in the discussion at the planning board? And in this case we're talking about here, are we headed towards something like that, or is it strictly just the convenience of the applicant at this point in time?
I would think that obviously that this particular application is written so that the applicant would be able to do what his intents are, since he's the one that's bringing it forward, with our assistance in trying to write some things. But certainly what we were looking for were protections.
I doubt if a crop dusting company, will be using a rural airstrip like that, because, see, they have to go back to where they keep the chemicals to refill,
Well,
fill
that-
up.
Part of my
But
concern.
they would be probably spraying crops in those areas, but they wouldn't be landing, going in and out from an airstrip like that.
We did ask, in the process, we did ask the fire marshal's office if they had concern about either fuel storage or that kind of thing, or chemical storage related to a small crop dusting kind of operation. And they said that if there were, sufficient, well, first of all, their feeling was that somebody that has a small plane is much more likely to go someplace else and fuel it rather than try to keep their own airplane fuel on site. From that perspective. And from the chemical perspective, they indicated that if there was a sufficient amount that needed to be regulated of some chemical, then there are other regulations that take care of that concentration of chemicals.
I
didn't get real specific with them about that.
I don't see crop dusting as a problem. I mean, as far as landings, because they have to go where they store the chemicals, where they can reload and go back and spray the crops. They wouldn't be landing at a road, not unless they have some emergency on the plane that they need to come down. If that be the case, they'll come down out there in the field.
Our thought was just that the scale of it would be small enough that if it was, sort of a one-man operation, then it wouldn't be that much.
In this particular applicant is not a commercial use, is that correct?
That operation by the applicant?
Yes.
We would not consider that to be a separate commercial use of the property.
No, I mean, the one we have before us today is not for a commercial use. That's a question.
This is a countywide amendment,
I understand that.
and so you'll need to ask the applicant, I think, rather
Okay,
than.
so you don't
us.
know the answer to
Right.
that, okay. All right, my next question, and I do have some concerns with this, but certainly don't want to prevent it from moving forward, but in a case where, we approve this and there's a house there, could the R40 lot be subdivided later and that house sold and the airstrip still be on the remaining of the land?
Yeah, well, it could, in this case, yes,
If you met
because
the
it's,
other requirements?
yes, because as long as it can meet the other requirements. What might be difficult is that once you
Right.
once you subdivide the lot out that has the house on it, particularly in this case, the house is in the front,
Sure.
then all of a sudden you're not meeting your requirement of being so close to an off-site residence.
Sure.
The distance is from an off-site residence, and you're probably not going to meet that.
Yeah.
Unless you included that possibility when you were laying it out in the beginning.
All right. I'm at a point where this is a countywide ordinance that applies to every piece of land, and we all know that what we're doing here today probably is just fine, but once you do something like this, I'm always reminded about a gentleman's comment on some years ago on a change like this about not able to put toothpaste back in a tube once you squeeze it out, and that's where my concern comes from. The last one, and Mr. Chairman, I'll try to get off of it at that point. You got a rather stringent requirement as far as adjacent lots. I guess that was maybe custom tailored to this particular use, one of them being that 50% of them have to be 10 acres or more. And does that make any restriction to those other lots that have 10-acre lots where they couldn't subdivide it later?
The idea behind that, I'll say two things. One is that's part of the area where, that's part of the D section where we were trying to ensure or trying to improve the probability that these things would be in an area that resembles the A1
Sure.
more than a more suburban or subdivision-oriented area. But the idea is that once the landing strip is there, if you choose to build a house next to it, that's on you. It doesn't affect the viability or the requirement of the landing strip. The landing strip meets its requirements at the time that it's approved or developed. If you come in and want to build your house right behind it, or want to subdivide property right behind it, then the burden or the consideration of trying to sell the lot that backs right up to the landing strip where somebody's going to build their house right in the path, that's on that purchaser or on that developer. But the restriction to meet that requirement, you could still develop the property that was behind it after the fact. Because you would do it with the knowledge that the landing strip was there, is the feeling.
Okay. I just was concerned about how it affected other property owners and the ability to use the land like they wanted to, but you say it has no effect on it.
Right,
It
no,
would just
that-
be a violation of the ordinance at the time it happened,
Well,
kind of, sort of.
it would prevent the landing strip from going there if
Right.
it was already platted or in the process of being platted.
That's good enough.
But what it may affect for that property owner is their ability to sell or the desirability of a few of those lots that might back right up to it, if that were the case.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding commercially using the strip, would the owner have any requirement to, what are the requirements if the owner determines to do that in terms of the chemicals on site and that sort of thing?
I'm not sure what the specific requirements are, but that would be handled by the fire marshal's office if it were chemicals that were hazardous or volatile or any of those kinds of
Could
things.
the owner just bring the chemicals on site without any of that work requirement or what?
I think they're required to know, notify or to know, the fire marshal's office keeps up with those like hazardous material lists and those kind of things, and then they would regulate how that, if there's barriers around it, the same kind of things they do with oil tanks and
So
natural
you
gas
know
tanks
for a
and those
fact
kinds of
that they
things.
cannot just bring chemicals on site to do anything commercial with those chemicals or otherwise?
It's my understanding that they have to notify that the fire marshal's office has to know where those chemicals are stored, unless it's an agricultural operation, and I'm not sure what those are,
But
what those requirements are.
notification to the fire marshal, they could bring them on site.
Ye- mhm.
Are you referring to hazardous material?
Yes.
Well, you're gonna have to do a little bit more than notification to the fire marshal, and the Environmental Protection Agency be involved in that?
I think that's, I'm not a crop duster, and so I'm not sure how that works exactly, but I would think in the licensing procedures, that would be part of that, learning for what you need to do for your certifications and
Exactly. How they're
licenses.
stored and everything, and how they're handled. All that stuff got to go through the Environmental Protection Agency. They got to approve that,
Diener.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Let me, I got
go
one more
ahead.
thing I want to ask.
Oh, are you through?
No, I'm not quite
Okay.
through, but I guess that's a concern of mine. I'd like to know more about the chemical use,
Okay,
the restrictions on the chemical use,
okay. Yes, sir.
particularly in the world we live in today. I don't have any concerns about this applicant, but I have concerns about the world we live in today, and I believe you can take a small aircraft like this, and you don't even have to file a flight plan. You can just take it up, and is that correct?
Yes.
You might want to verify that
Well, I
with
know
the
that's correct.
applicant who's a pilot, but I believe it is
I'm pretty
correct.
sure that's correct. You don't have to file a flight plan. You can just take it up. and-
Right, they're not this kind of strip is not regulated by the FAA.
And if I've got, and there are people in this world today that if they can just take a plane up with no flight plan and they've got access to chemicals and they've got access to a lot of people, then they can do a lot of harm. And I know this applicant wouldn't do that, but I'm just concerned about knowing more about that particular thing in general.
Sure, and it is a countywide
Yeah, and that's what I'm
ordinance.
saying, you're opening it up to the county in general.
I'll be glad to get that
The
information to you.
second thing is, one of the planning board members voted against it. What was the reason?
He was interested in actually having some more regulation related to surrounding properties and being sure that it was not in an area that was like next to a subdivision or that kind of thing.
Did he or she get that?
No,
So he or she is still not satisfied with that particular concern, or?
well, he acknowledged that it was, that we were attempting to do that and that it was that there were some protections in there for the development, but he didn't feel like that was enough.
Okay. Third question,
Yes.
final question. Under general requirements, it speaks to specific distance. And then under specific requirements, it speaks to specific distance for residents, right-of-ways, et cetera. Is there any conflict there? I mean, I've got 500 feet from a right-of-way in general, but under specific, it looks like, maybe I'm just not reading it correctly. It looks like 200 and to a residence or a
Residentially
residential
zoned
lot or a residence.
The ones in section D relate to a residence or residentially zoned lot, and the one in the general requirements is the current standard, basic standard for DOT's distance from road right-of-ways.
But I mean, you can have a house just off from the right-of-way, right?
Yes,
So you've got to have 500 feet to get to that right-of-way. So the house would be greater than the 500 feet. What about the 200 feet? That's got a right-of-way as well.
well, like in this, you see that this distance is further on the front because that's the distance that's required by the right-of-way.
Yeah.
If, as we talked about earlier, if the strip were in a location or in a spot that there was not a house in the front on the right-of-way,
But maybe I just,
I'm not sure what, maybe I'm
maybe I
not
just
getting your
don't
question.
understand, but it says under C, dimensional requirements, there shall be a minimum distance of 200 feet between any portion of the landing strip and the nearest off-site residence or residentially zoned lot. So when I come to that residentially zoned lot, there's a right-of-way for the DOT if it's located on a road.
Well, if the house is less than 500 feet and it's between the landing strip and the road, or,
What am I missing?
wait a minute, Sam, I'm not sure what,
What am I missing? I don't understand.
I think it's a matter of, it's gotta be 200 feet from the house, but 500 feet from the right of way, which is what they structured this particular one here for. He's got 200 feet from that.
So you gotta have 500 feet to the right-of-way and then an additional 200 feet from the house? Is that what it's saying?
No, the 200 feet.
no, the 200 feet could be within the
So the
500.
200 feet, but it's got to be a minimum of 500 feet. So the 200, the 150, all those other numbers have to be within that 500.
Right, the 500 is the largest separation distance, but in a rural area, it's not unusual to have you may have the house may be back up off the road on a hill or down a path, and then the landing strip could be behind that, but the house itself might be, not right up on the road.
You got to meet both of those requirements.
So
200
All right.
from the
if it's 500 feet from the road, but the landing strip is 200
You
feet,
know, if you meet the 500, you got to meet the 200.
right.
Well, no, the house could be 600 feet from the
But,
road.
The
But
DOT's
beyond the
requirement is
right-of-way,
more restringent.
Yeah,
all right, the
that's
500
that's
feet.
700 feet.
all right, the 500 feet is from the road, right?
Correct.
All right, that's what I'm trying to understand. So the 500 feet is from the right-of-way at the road. And then once I go beyond the right-of-way, I've got to have another 200 or 150, whatever it is in here. So it could be 650 or 700 feet.
If the house was back that far,
Right.
it could be.
Okay.
Right.
You wouldn't.
Whichever one of those was more restrictive is the one that would govern. In most cases, going from the landing strip towards the road, it's going to be the 500 feet that DOT requires.
And that's
But within
clear. I
that
guess
five-
that's clear with everybody but me, but I don't.
Okay,
Well, if the house was sitting at 500 feet, you gotta have the 500 feet for the right of way, but you still got to have the 200 feet from the house. So in that case, it'd be 700 feet.
But it doesn't really say that. It just gives
No.
you general requirements and then it
Thinking it
gives you
could be-
dimensional requirements for specific.
no, the landing strip, the 200 feet wouldn't take it to 700. The 200 feet could be within the 500 that
Sure,
DOT
depending on where the house
requires.
at.
But the minimum is 500.
That's
To the
that's
right-of-way.
from the,
That's not to
from,
any
from
structure.
from the road.
It's to the right-of-way. So
Right,
you
to the
would have at
right-of-way.
least 500 plus feet to any structure. You
No,
would,
the structure
okay.
could be, it's a minimum of
No,
200 feet to a lot, and a minimum of 300 feet on the sides. On the sides of it, that's on, from here, it has to be 350 feet to a residence. Okay? Has to be 500 feet from here to the right-of-way.
all
So there's
right.
a house within that 500 feet, but that house is on site, so there's not a distance requirement for that. If this house,
Yeah.
this house can be closer than 500 feet to the landing strip, it has to be,
So the owner can put his house, it can be anywhere on the site.
correct.
But people that live on adjacent lots, the minimum is 500 feet?
No, no.
No.
No, it's 500 feet going towards the road.
Okay.
It's 200 feet to any adjacent lot that might have a residence on it,
Lot line.
okay? And it has to be actually 350 feet from the side going down to another residence, all along in here. If there were any residences in here, that would have to be 350 feet, not 500 feet on the side.
I don't read.
Doesn't make sense?
For clarification, can I? Ms.
Let
Barnes.
me
has a
let
question.
Commissioner Barnes, she has a question, then the county manager.
My question relates to the special use permitting process. So, you still have to have a special use permit to.
Yes. What we would get is we would get from the applicant a site plan that shows all the dimensional requirements and how the landing strip fits on the lot. and meets all those requirements. And that site plan and the application would be the basis of what would go to the Board of Adjustment.
And is that renewable, like, how often?
Actually, a special use permit runs with the land.
It does
So
run
you
with
could
the land.
continue to operate that as long as it was operated as a landing strip.
But it still comes up as on a case-by-case
Yes.
circumstance. Okay.
And there's the notifications to the properties around within 600 feet, same as we do with zoning. And so there would be opportunity for neighbors to come and speak at that meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. See?
Couple questions. First one, I'm going to ask for clarification on that last point. The 500 from the right-of-way, 500 feet from the right-of-way, if a house on the property is 100 feet from the right-of-way, then you only need 500 feet.
Correct.
If the house on the property is 500 feet from the right-of-way, how far do you need for the beginning of the airstrip? Meaning,
Say that one more time.
if the house on the property is 500 feet from the right-of-way, do you still have to go additional distance to the beginning of the airstrip?
I would think you would want to do that because the plane is coming down.
What does
And-
what
but
does
it-
the regulation say that? I mean,
Oh, the regulation
Sit right at
doesn't-
the end of the runway.
is it what?
It's written, it can sit right on the end of the runway.
Okay. The next question I have, as written, can this special use permit be used for commercial purposes?
Only by the owner, only for the owner.
So if the owner has a crop dusting operation, full-time, he can operate a crop dusting
Yes.
operation. And the current statute, the current language does not require a residence of the owner on the property, correct?
Correct.
So I've seen crop dusters that are dusting fields adjacent to highways, drop down right over the highway, and you hear that noise, and then dust, and then go back up. Under the statute the language is written, someone could have a landing strip 10 miles from their house on totally vacant land for full-time commercial purpose by the owner of the property.
The way it's written here, yes, they could do that. They could do that also under the current language, I think, in the A1, OI, GC, and PI. They could also do that in the A1.
Sure,
So that's not a restriction that exists in the ordinance currently either.
and understand that pretty well. I mean, that's a lot better.
Right, so what we were trying to do was match the current requirements in the A1 to what we were looking at in the R40, and then look at if we needed more R40 because it's a more restriction in the R40 because it's a residential district.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we get through the
Well,
public hearing and see what we're doing?
let me say this. If this applicant want to have a crop dusting landing field, he's gonna have to do more than just coming up here for approval of a landing strip. Got to go through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, all that, and meet those state requirements.
Yes, or whatever it's required
Yeah.
for,
So what he's
property.
asking for here today has no bearing on a crop dusting business.
Well, we don't know that yet. We hadn't heard from him.
Well, I think I do.
It's not just for this piece of property.
I understand,
any-
I understand this is for the countywide, but still, even if it being countywide, he just cannot just go there and have a landing strip for crop dusting, just like that, no.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need some more clarification on all this stuff. How about take a 5-minute break? Don't have to. I ain't gonna have a question. What you gonna do now?
Okay, you need a break?
Yep.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break. And we'll be back,
10-minute break.
and we'll go into public hearing.
I would say.
Call the meeting back to order. All right, we've had our questions now. I'm gonna call for a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Commissioner Davis,
Second.
second by Commissioner Bond. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion passed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in a public hearing on the UDO text amendment related to land strips. Anyone wish to come up and speak may come up and give your name and your address, for or against.
Hello, Thomas Troyer, the applicant.
Morning.
What was that name again?
Thomas Troyer, Troyer.
Okay, speak.
For the amendment, here to answer any questions, comments.
Anything you want to say regarding your intentions with the landing strip?
My intentions are to build a strip, build a hangar. I currently have a hangar at a Johnson County Airport, which is pretty far away. So I'd like to build a hangar so I can maintain my planes there and do some flying out of there. I do have an aerial application business. My intent is not to operate that out of here. I operate out of Wilson Industrial and help other guys out on the coast, but it's too short for me to operate one out of here. And I don't have the facilities to store the chemicals and permits, et cetera, et cetera.
Any questions from any commissioners?
Mr. Belfield,
Yeah.
should not this have been discussed prior to presentation to this board?
Well, that's why we got planning board. The planning board had a big discussion on it.
Or have they?
And they sent their recommendations to us for, as commissioners, to approve or deny.
Mr. Chairman, a couple questions I would have, Thomas, if you don't mind. I guess you understand if we approve this, we're not only approving your situation, we're approving it throughout all of Nash County.
Yes, sir.
That meets this criteria, and that's where our concern comes from, and I hope you appreciate that.
Oh, yes.
But you said you operated what type of business?
Aerial application, crop dusting.
Crop dust, okay. That's the new word for crop dusting?
Yes, sir.
Aerial
That's the more
application. Okay.
friendly term.
I agree with you. We have a lot of new words this day and time.
Yes, sir.
Which is probably good. So it's not your intent to do that here. I understood you said that.
Correct.
When you apply for a special use permit, and Nancy may have to ask this, and that's where our concern comes from, is that type of operation. And you stand here saying you're not, I firmly believe you're not. But once, in other words, you may live there 5 years, something may carry you to a new area, you could sell your place and then the hangar, and the next person move in could very well do that from that location. That's what we're somewhat guarded
And
against.
if I could make 3,000 or 4,000 feet of runway, I would be trying to do that as well.
So what you would do would be, is the plane that you're gonna land there one that you use in this business?
Yes,
Okay. So you would leave that location, go to wherever your operation worked out of, and then leave, and load your chemicals, et cetera.
correct.
What I'll do is ask Ms. Nixon, that when she comes back up in a minute after public hearing, is if the special use permit could tie it down so that was really what would happen if you were to sell the place later. You see what I'm saying? So we'd know that that operation wouldn't actually go on there. So you're just gonna bring your plane there, you'll be at home, you walk in the house, and leave the next morning and go again?
Yes, or I'll probably leave it elsewhere, but in the winter, mainly bring it home and work on it during the
Okay,
winter.
okay.
But, so you wouldn't want in the future then, if I could find 100 acres somewhere else, you wouldn't want a 3,000, if I could get a 3,000 foot, you don't want a crop dusting business.
No, certainly would be tickled to have that, but not in an R40 zone. That's a
Okay.
residential zone.
Right.
You would need to be in an A1 zone or an I zone of some kind, or some kind of B zone maybe. But the R40 is what is concerning us, or concerning me. I can't speak for the rest of the board.
Right.
But that's where my concern is.
Okay.
It's just the fact that what you're asking for is for us to allow this in an R40 zone.
Yes.
And I guess we looked at the possibility of rezoning your particular piece of property so you wouldn't have to go through this, and this was probably the easiest route for you to get from point A to point B, which we always try to accommodate our citizens when we can. Nancy is shaking her head that this was the easiest route to get there. I guess that's all the questions I had. And I hope you do understand that we are dealing with a whole county, not your situation
Absolutely.
individually. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anyone else with any questions?
Clarification, R40 means residential 40,000 square feet minimum? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? As far as question, anything else you want to add?
No, sir.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for or against? Anyone else wish to speak for or against? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Barnes. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers said no. Motion carried. We are now out of the public hearing, back into our regular session.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that Ms. Nixon give us a brief explanation of what could be covered under a special use permit concerning this particular situation.
I would think that in order to accommodate, what you might want to do is under B3, you might want to just stop that one out, the landing strip shall not be used commercially, period. In the instance described by this applicant, he's using a personal plane that's also used in the business, but all he's doing is taking off and landing from his site and going someplace else and conducting the business. And that would be, maybe be considered, a little more extravagantly, but I think similar to somebody that works for a plumbing company that drives the plumbing van home. And so overnight in his yard, there's a plumbing van, as an example. But he's not operating the business out of that location. That's his transportation to get to and from work. And in this case, you would have a plane that is used in, say, the applicant's business, which is, what do you call it, aerial application. But he's not storing the chemicals and that kind of thing at this location. He's basically commuting by plane to his other
My
location.
real question is,
Is that what you're after?
not really.
Okay.
Well, yes, but not really. I want to know if there's an avenue to do it under the special use permit that he's got to apply for after we make this text amendment. Because I can see some compatible commercial uses maybe in an R40 zone.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, we got an operation up at Lake Gaston where a guy, you go to his house and he'll put you in his plane and show you the lake. That wouldn't be so intrusive, but maybe this is the only way we can do it, what you suggested. I want to make sure it fit the applicant's real need, but under special use permit, could we control it any better?
I think that you have to set out what the parameters are in this ordinance, so the special use permit, what that board is doing is taking these requirements and being sure that he fits them.
So that's more just proving that you
Right.
met the requirements in here.
Right.
Okay, I see what you're
Could
saying.
add something to this general requirement, saying aerial application is not allowed within the R40 zone, period. And then you will allow it in A1 and some of these
Sure.
other areas.
Well, I certainly don't want to mess with the other ones.
What we're doing is getting the man to, getting him to and from work. That's why he's driving a vehicle, to and from work, that's all it is.
Just compatible.
So why are we gonna constrict that to an area that he can't drive his plane? If he drives his plane home, as long as it's sitting in the same place every day or every week, what is wrong with that? I mean, I don't see no change that's been made, do you? He drives his plane home from work and then leaves there and goes somewhere else. He goes back somewhere else, where he wants to eat or where he wants to go. Ain't no different than driving that in a car. What is the difference? If he's not gonna use it there.
Sure. I'm fine with that, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, that's fine, that's what I'm talking about. He ought not have all these restrictions to have his own.
All right.
I don't think it's, I don't see why you can't do it, just take out the commercial use in the R40.
I think that's
Yeah.
fine. That would allow the
If there's-
commercial uses
If there's ever an
in the
occasion to
A1.
where there's some need for commercial use to go up and give people a tour of Nash County or whatever the occasion may be as a business, then that's something that could come back for discussion and review. I'm concerned about commercial use in an R40.
That's an easy revision to make in
That's
terms
just
of
my
the text,
opinion.
if that was what the board decided.
Okay,
Could we, Mr. Chairman, confirm that that suits the applicant for his current need, if we were to do that? I'd like to hear him, be okay with that.
is that okay with you?
As long as I can bring the plane out, work on it, store it there, I'm fine.
Okay.
All right,
Excuse
okay, now I'm ready, we've had quite a discussion here, I'm ready to move on. We have
I'd
two,
like to have,
and discussion's been good. What was that you gonna add?
I'd like for us to have a board discussion about the part about the residents having to live on that site. Because I just don't want to see airstrips showing up in R40 zones where there's not a resident staying there. And the staff seem to be okay with that. And I guess our current applicant does live at this location.
And the only other airstrip that I'm aware of, as I said, is not in our jurisdiction, but I believe the applicant lives at that
He does.
location as well.
He does.
I mean, the property owner, I'm sorry.
Right. They do.
The operator.
Okay, I need two motions. One is to approve the consistency statement on the UDO text amendment related to airstripping.
I'd like to know if we need to make those clarifications before that first motion or
Well, you
after,
can
Mr.
put it in
Chairman.
the motion.
Could you help me with that, Mr. Attorney?
Sure.
I mean, can we clear the first motion and then put it in the second one?
I mean, I would think you'd make your motion subject to the addition of those two requirements,
Okay, for both motions?
yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any problem with the residential requirement?
No.
We okay with that?
I think I
Okay.
want to accommodate the man myself.
And we'll be doing that, Mr.
That's what
Morgan?
we're trying to do.
Sure.
There you go. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the consistency statement with the two changes that we're speaking of, which is to remove any commercial use from an airstrip in an R40 zone and to require that the person that operates the airstrip to live on the property.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Morgan, that we have a conditional use where the applicant live on the property and that not be used for commercial use in an R40. You ready? You've heard the motion. Are you now ready for the question? Question is, all in favor of it? Let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposes the same sign. That motion carried. Now, I need a motion to approve the text amendments statement.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the text amendment with the two changes referenced in the consistency statement.
Second.
It's moved by Commissioner Outlaw and seconded by Commissioner Morgan that we approve the text amendment with the statements that were made in the consistent statement. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. And opposers say no. Motion carried. Unanimous. Okay, thank you. Now we go to item 7.
Thank you. This item is continued from the previous meeting. Involves revisions, proposed revisions to the land development plan. Those revisions are, I'll review them quickly, along the Highway 97 corridor. They would expand the commercial node, or the commercial area in the land development plan, which is currently rural commercial, along at the intersection of Highway 97 and Highway 58. The existing node that's shown on the land development plan is shown here in pink. It would extend it to within that red boundary. And also another proposal, word went right out of my head. Another proposal is to change that from a rural commercial designation to a general commercial designation within the land development plan based on its accessibility to public water and sewer. And then the other area of change in the plan would be at the near the I-95 interchange with 97, and that would, at that location currently, there is a general commercial area designated that would be extended slightly to the west, and then an industrial area designated that would be expanded in the surrounding area to create a larger industrial tract for marketing and for future development purposes. The board had requested some additional information. At the last meeting, I did send that out in a memorandum and talked about the relationship between a land use plan and UDO changes. And so I would ask at this time if y'all have any questions, or do you want me to review, would you like for me to review anything else related to this proposal?
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
have you talked to what the change was done? What is the people around in the area that it is encompassing? What was it designed to do, or what were they satisfied with what it was going to be designed to do?
As we mentioned at the last meeting, Mr. Morgan, there was not a specific notification. The public hearing was advertised in all 3 newspapers, but there was not a property notification because it's not a zoning change, it's a change to the countywide development plan.
I think it all ought to be done according to the people out there, what they want to, and what they are, and what they're not. They're not abusing anything on, and it should be for the people that's out there being, that's connected by. What is the purpose of it? Is it going to affect the homes that's already out there, or what are we doing with that? Are we doing anything that would change that?
It doesn't change the zoning that's there, so it doesn't change what somebody could do with their property currently or in the future, unless they wanted to rezone it or they wanted to come back and request a rezoning for their property, then those notifications would happen at the rezoning stage. I think what having the land development plan changed, what that does is it indicates that should a rezoning come in, that the Board of Commissioners would have determined that that area is, because of the services that are available, that area is more conducive to a commercial or an industrial development in the future because we're able to serve it with public services. But it doesn't, if somebody comes in with a rezoning and the board is not in favor of the rezoning, then certainly there's no requirement that the board vote because the land development plan shows it on there. There is a certainly an acknowledgement of whether or not it's consistent. But you could have a commercial request, say a conditional use request for a commercial business that you don't think is appropriate at that location. There's no requirement that the board
Would keep you from.
rezone it to that specific thing, if you don't
Okay.
like the business once it's approached.
Okay, Commissioner Outlaw was one to raise a concern in our last meeting, and I believe we're gonna check with some of the people that live in that area.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval to amend the LDP.
Okay, there's a motion by Commissioner Outlaw to approve the LDP.
Mr. Chairman, I will second that motion, then I'd like to make a brief
Well,
statement.
okay, motion by Commissioner Outlaw, seconded by Commissioner Davis. You've heard that motion. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to say, to maybe help Mr. Morgan understand maybe what we're doing is, this kind of is a request from the Gateway Partnership for us countywide to look at areas that may be developed as industrial uses. And in this particular location, we now have sewer available, so we have all utilities available down this corridor. And that's what's made us take another look at this particular one, because, Mr. Morgan, we're finishing up our sewer line out to these sites. And it would remove one step that we would have to go through in the future were we to get a person that was interested in a tract of land in this area that's served by sewer. We still have a very intensive public hearing process for rezoning, if indeed that the property owners could get involved in, but this is just revising our overall plan, the way the county looks at it. And we have just learned over the last 4 or 5 years that everything we can do ahead of time, because when these industries come in and look, they are looking for reasons to take you off in the list for coming to York County, and we're trying our best to bring jobs to the Twin County area. And this is just one little thing that this board could do to help that process, and that's why I think we should indeed do it. And the reason I was certainly in favor of seconding Mr. Outlaw's motion.
And I have not heard of any issues that any of the residents have. And if you go by that particular property, Mr. Morgan and others, there's already a sign out there where it's for sale for commercial purposes. So it's pretty well known that the sewer's coming down that corridor, and that particular intersection is a very viable site for such activity.
It's something that's, have already been looked at, the people have looked at it and say, and we all have looked at it, or we have looked at it and say it's coming, and what are we getting for it being rezoned?
There's already one business at that particular.
One business.
Yeah, it's already
Right now,
one,
there's
yeah.
one.
But there's how many out there, and how many places you could have 10 out there after this, though, is that not right?
You could have more, yes,
20 or
ma'am.
whatever.
Possible.
Well, that's right.
Okay, back to the question. All in favor of this motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, unanimous. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, we had I apologize, I had a resolution for the adoption for the land development plan. I think it was in your packet.
No.
If not, was not, all right, then we'll just go with the ordinance. Thank you.
There is a
It's
resolution.
With that change.
Oh, it's in there?
There is a resolution.
Hold on, let me pull it
Do
up.
you want a motion to adopt the resolution?
That makes it easier for me to keep it in the land development plan if you would adopt in that format.
Mr.
all
Chairman, I
right,
move
we,
for adoption of
I
the
call for a
resolution
motion
amending-
to adopt the resolution, and I believe Commissioner Outlaw made the motion.
Right.
Who seconded it?
I'll be glad to second it as well, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seconded by, excuse me, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor of adopting that resolution, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, Assistant Rosemary, we have our new veteran administrator here for Nash County.
Yes.
And will you introduce him to the commissioners.
I'll be glad to, and we're just going to skip around on the agenda briefly so Tyler can get back to work. But as you know, we started and opened a new full-time, 5-day-a-week Veteran Service Office effective July 1. And we're happy to announce that we have Mr. Tyler Staverman here to run that office. He'll be hiring a part-time helper soon, but he did start on Friday. And Tyler, if you'll come up. I did send an email earlier giving you a little bit of background about him, but we wanted you to see his face and let him say a few happy words, and we'll get him back to work.
Happy only, huh?
Hello, let's see, my name is Tyler Stamen, as you have already heard. Let's see, just for trying to find some basic things about myself, I am a veteran, which I believe is important for this job. Let's see, when I was a veteran, I was a medic. When I got out, I got interested in psychology and behavioral with helping veterans. Got a degree in psychology, got a degree in social work. Now I'm here trying to help veterans. Let's see, this NC for Vets resource guide, I put a significant amount of time and effort into developing this. I don't know if you all have ever seen this before, but it is a much, much better resource guide than North Carolina has ever had, and we're hoping to get other states to follow in suit, which it looks like they are. That is it as far as what I had for you all. Is there any specific questions that anybody had?
I may have,
But just welcome to Nash County and do a good job for our veterans.
I know Rosemary sent out the bio on you, but I think it might be good if the public was aware of your military background. You might have just said it, and I didn't hear it. Your tours of duty.
Yes, yes. Let's see, I was in the North Carolina National Guard for 8 years. I only deployed actually one time, supposed to be twice, but there's a mix up with some paperwork. Either way, I got deployed one time as a rather long deployment, but as a medic, I did the medic thing the whole time. I did line medic duty, which basically means you go out with the actual group that you're with, and that if someone gets hurt, then call out medic, that's a line medic. And then there's the other medic, which is the one that hangs out in the clinic and does clinical work, and I've done both, so in the military.
Any comments or questions from any commissioner?
Were you deployed to,
Oh, yes, I was deployed to southern Baghdad when I deployed at Fog Falcon. It was back in 2009 to 2010.
well, we're very glad to have you here.
All right, I'm glad to be here for sure. There's definitely plenty of veterans to serve here, and I've run into that this morning. I've already had, what, 4 or 5 of them come in, so I'm on it.
Great.
Okay.
Whatever we should do it for the people in that area, what they want too,
Right.
I think, whatever that may be. It's their business, and that's their living, that's where they live, so look after that, or look after the people that's already out there.
All right, I will do.
Okay, thank you, and we're gonna let you get back to your office so you can serve the veterans.
I will do. All right, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, medical retirement for K-9.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Morning.
The item that I have before you today is the medical retirement of K-9 Officer Sasha. K-9 Officer Sasha has been a loyal member of the Nash County Sheriff's Office since April of 2009. K-9 Officer Sasha has been Sergeant Greg Adams' K-9 partner through different patrol assignments and most recently at the Highway Interdiction Team. In November 2015, K-9 Officer Sasha was diagnosed with a cancerous tumor which resulted in the amputation of one of her front legs. In January 2016, we decided to keep K-9 Officer Sasha in service based on her recent recovery and activity levels. On June 21st, 2016, we reevaluated K-9 Officer Sasha and placed her on inactive status based on her condition and age. The Nash County Sheriff's Office is requesting approval to officially retire K-9 Sasha and award her the permanent care and custody of Sergeant Greg Adams.
Any questions, discussion? Commissioner?
Are you putting the dog into somebody else's care, or the one that's been handling all the time?
Commissioner Morgan, it'll be with Sergeant Greg Adams. He'll be able to, we're requesting for him to,
It'll be his dog, you know, I mean, his handling of it.
yes, sir.
Okay.
It'll be his dog when they
That's
get him.
all I-
Well, it'll be his dog from now on through life.
Yes, sir.
great.
That's what I'm telling Commissioner Morgan. Okay, you heard the request?
I move the request.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Wells, second by Commissioner Barnes.
Right.
All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers, no. Motion carried, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Derek?
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
As you may know, you had an item in your packet for this Highway 97 sewer project. I will ask that you please remove the item that was in your packet and use the one that I'd placed at your desk. We had some last-minute changes at the end of last week, and just thought it was pertinent to replace those. One thing first is please report that we are almost complete with the Highway 97 sewer project, as we just heard as part of the LDP amendment. And we are bringing you this item today because we're getting close to a grant closeout, as said at the end of October. So there's a construction item that we'd like to pursue, and in order to do that, it was necessary to bring this item for you today. But I will recommend this board approve construction change order number 2 for the Highway 97 sewer project with Ralph Hodge Construction, along with an amendment number 1 to the engineering contract with the Wooten Company. Give you a little bit of contract history. We issued a construction contract with Ralph Hodge back in September 1st, 2015, and we had a change order shortly thereafter that brought the construction total to $2,300,000, essentially. Again, the project involves the construction of 3 wastewater lift stations extending sewer along Highway 97, approximately 10 miles from our existing system to just east of the Highway 97-95 interchange. And this will bring access of sewer to 3 general areas and a possible future connection to the airport, which we'll also talk about briefly. The construction change order number 2, I'm asking for an amount not to exceed $39,050. And the reason for that is with the July 4th holidays and a number of other people on vacations, I was trying to get an official change order for you today, but was unable to get that in time. But change order number 2 is for a contract increase, which is still under negotiation, not to exceed that $39,050. Purpose of the change order is to install a flow meter, wiring, and telemetry to a manhole located in close proximity to our main Bel Air lift station. And that lift station then pumps sewer to the city of Rocky Mount. This meter would replace, originally in the project, we had put inline force main flow meter over at our new Old Carriage Road lift station, and we're proposing to move that to this manhole for a number of, I think, positive reasons looking forward. But basically this change order, this meter will better prepare us to share in some of the many benefits with the city of Rocky Mount in an effort to have them take over the Bel Air lift station, and also as Bel Air customers, you may recall some time ago, we have about 55 water sewer customers in Bel Air subdivision that are in Rocky Mount's annexed area, but they are our water and sewer customers, and we have an agreement with them that expires in June 2018. So this helps us better prepare for that changeover as well. A credit for the originally proposed meter, along with some additional electrical work, is still being negotiated, which would offset this change order 2 cost, but I'm at this point asking for the full cost of the change order per our Ralph Hodge, and that's in your packet at your desk. Again, current construction cost amount is $2,300,818.20. Also on this item, agenda item, we're asking for additional engineering services in the amount of $4,500 to evaluate the feasibility and cost of a sewer connection by the Rocky Mount Wilson Regional Airport to the county's new sewer system, of which the airport would contribute $3,000 of this $4,500. If feasible, the airport's lift station would likely be upgraded and they would no longer be connected to the town of Sharpsburg. We've been working with Sharpsburg and the airport for quite some time, and I'm not saying that even if this is feasible, we may or may not proceed with that, but this will be essentially a separate project. The construction will be a separate project after our Highway 97 sewer project is complete. The previous approved grant project ordinance has $2,576,760 approved in construction. So even with this change order, no additional changes to that line item are necessary. However, the engineering amendment for the $4,500 is reflected in the revised grant project ordinance at your chair. As you recall, Golden Leaf has agreed to match the project with $1.5 million, with the balance of $1.680 coming from county's Economic Development Fund. At this point, though, we expect a significant cost underrun to the project, probably in the tune of about $450,000 under budget. So I'm pleased to be able to report that too. Recommended action at this point would be to award change order number 2 to Ralph Hod Construction, subject to revisions being approved by the county manager, along with amendment number 1 to the Wooten Company and amendment number 2 to the grant project ordinance as attached, and all of this would be subject to Golden Leaf's final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions that the board might have at this time.
Any questions?
Is this an addition to what they're already getting?
Yes, we're asking for additional work of installing this a lot larger, better meter at a different location, which essentially has the result of about $39,000 is what I'm asking for today. However, the existing meter that we were taking out, I think, has a value of about $9,000 or $10,000. So I'm hoping with all this change order work that the county manager would approve would then be in about the $25,000 to $28,000 range, somewhere in that ballpark of what additional construction costs that we're looking at. And then the engineering is $4,500 just to evaluate the airport's lift station and how that would interact with our system. And there's some inflow and I&I inflow and infiltration issues out there, and there's also some work that would need to be done to that lift station if they were to become our sewer customer. And I could say that the airport and Sharpsburg would be very excited for them to come onto our system, and they are, Rocky Mount Wilson Airport's a current water customer of ours, so it likely makes sense to just add them as a sewer customer. But the additional work, what I've told the airport, if we were to connect them in the future, that the airport and or their grant money that they have access to would have to fund a lot of that construction, if not all of it. So I'm expecting that to work with them over the next years or so to try to implement that if it's feasible.
In other words, you're $439,000 in an increase, right?
I'm asking for $39,000 as an increase, but I'm not asking for anything added to the grant project ordinance for construction because the board's already appropriated more than enough funds to construction because we're so under budget, or so much under budget in the construction line item.
Okay.
Just a couple questions, just for clarification. The contract history on your information sheet, I assume you meant December 7th, 2015?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just
Yes.
pointing that out for your records.
Yep.
And on the amendment number 1, it's dated, I'm just a little confused, it may be right, September 8th, 2014, but then it talks about the amendment dated today.
So the original contract, I think, was dated
September 8th.
8th, 2014, and today is just the $4,500 is in that amendment 1 to the engineering services contract.
Okay, well, it says September 1 on the information sheet that it was originally approved in September 1, 2015. So I don't know where the September 8th, I'm more concerned about the amendment. Just check those dates.
Okay, yeah, I'll talk with you after the meeting, make sure I got that right.
Okay, I need 2 motions. One to approve the change order.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the change order This is important because it allows us to better separate the sewer in a given pump station between what Rocky Mount's actually using and what Nash County will be using.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Richardson. All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried unanimous. All right, the next motion is to approve the engineering contract amendment.
And grant project ordinance, if you want to do that
And the
also.
project ordinance.
I also make a motion to approve both of those items, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Davis that we approve the project ordinance.
May I ask you one question, Mr. Davis?
Hold just a minute, let me get
Jimmy, go
the
ahead.
second, who was it?
Go ahead.
Commissioner?
Wells.
Commissioner Wells. All right, any unreadness?
I have a is this an increase in the total overall cost of the thing?
Is it what
Yes.
now?
The cost that we've already got in, that Nash County people and all them around it is gonna be paid back. It's gotta be paid back, hasn't it?
Well, some of this is grant, this is grant money.
But grant, somebody had to pay the grant, didn't they?
Well, it comes from government, which you pay your taxes, and that's, I'm sure that's a part of it.
It is within budget.
Yeah, it is. In fact,
And the airport has agreed to pay $3,000 of that $4,500, which they obviously feel like there's a big need from their standpoint.
What we're doing here, Mr. Morgan, is the airport, is currently served by the town of Sharpsburg.
yeah,
We would like to have that customer, and the airport would like for us to be their server. So we are trying to make sure, cost-wise, that we can provide them a better service and it not cost the county anything. So this particular part of the study, yes, it is an increase in the engineering fees, but it's $4,500. The airport's gonna pay $3,000 of that, we're gonna pay $1,500 of that.
Okay.
So we do get partly reimbursement. The overall contract with both of these items does not go up. We'll still be well under the original contract amount. But it is a slight increase for a badly needed flow meter, above what our current contract with Mr. Hodge is. But we will actually, moving forward, probably save a tremendous amount of money by being able to separate those uses at this point. Because right now, we are paying for all of it because we don't have the ability to separate them. So it's a good thing overall for Nash County and the people of Nash County.
As long as it's for the people, that's fine, because
Yes, sir.
it should be that way because they weren't paying all the bills. Okay.
Correct.
all in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers, no. Motion carried unanimous.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Okay, pass it.
The first item I have for your consideration is regarding Housing Urgent Repair Program 2014, the closeout of that project. In February, we submitted our final project management report to the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency for the Urgent Repair Program 2014. They subsequently notified us in April that we've met all the requirements to close the project. I just wanted to show some of the houses that we were able to complete, which you also have in your packet. Nash County worked with the Wooten Company to use $99,464 to rehabilitate 13 single-family homes. Of the 13, 11 were occupied by very low-income residents, and 2 by low-income residents. And of the 13 homes, 10 included elderly residents, and 3 included disabled residents. We worked with 4 local contractors, it says 3, but it was actually 4, who completed the housing improvements on schedule and within budget. using no Nash County funds, and we were able to switch out case number 13, which we found out was ineligible because it had already received funds 2 years ago. So we substituted case number 14, which is in your packet. You have photos of the homes, and on the project management report, it lists the types of improvements that we were able to serve the homes with, as well as the cost, the hard and soft cost of the project. And you also have included in your packet a closeout grant project ordinance, which finance supplied. And so the recommended action is to authorize the closing of the Urgent Repair Program 2014, including approval of the grant project ordinance. Close out.
All these are grants that you're referring to?
Yes, sir. The Housing Finance Agency provides these funds, which are targeted to individuals with special needs and low income, in an effort to keep people in their homes instead of going into nursing facilities and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, this is a report to us, and you've already closed out, and we helped 13 residents to improve their houses.
Yes, sir. We just need for you to approve the board to approve the grant closeout ordinance.
The grant program is $3,180,750, is that right? The total of all of it, everything, prior to that and now and all of it.
No.
It's a total of $99,464. All of that grant funding has already been spent. The contractors have been paid, and the state has approved for us to close this project out.
Move that we close it.
Second.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah,
Motion by Commissioner Bond to close out the grant project ordinance, and seconded by Commissioner Outlaw. All in favor of that motion, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried unanimous.
Okay, the second item I have for your consideration is regarding Housing Urgent Repair Program 2016. So we're closing out one and we're getting started with another. We're going to ask you to adopt a project budget ordinance and approve the program policies and authorize the execution of administrative documents. Nash County has been awarded $100,000 by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency under the 2016 cycle of the Urgent Repair Program. This is funded through the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund. No county funds are needed to execute the program except for advertising. We'll do some mailings and advertise in the newspaper. URP 16 provides deferred loans, which are up to $8,000 each, forgiven at a rate of $1,000 per year, to low-income homeowners for crucial repairs that enable the residents to remain in the home. The program does not require that the entire dwelling be brought up to usual rehabilitation standards, but can be helpful in stabilizing deterioration. Approximately 13 houses will be repaired through this program within Nash County, excluding inside the city limits of Rocky Mount, because since the city of Rocky Mount is a metropolitan statistical area and has its own URP funding that it can apply for and receive from the Housing Finance Agency. All homes must be occupied by special needs household, and they must have incomes at or below 50% of the median household income. 50% of those units must be actually below 30% of median household income. Special needs household includes those with the elderly, which is 62 and older, disabled, single parent, large family, children with elevated lead blood levels, and for the first time, military veterans. URP 16 regulations require that specific policies be developed for procurement, disbursement, and client assistance, and these are being reviewed currently by Housing Finance, and we, to ensure that all program updates are included. We have used the same set of policies, basically, for a number of years, a number of past rounds, and we only expect minor updates, if any, to be recommended by Housing Finance because we made adjustments to them before we sent them the drafts. We plan to take applications starting next Monday, July 11th, until July 27th. We plan to hold workshops in both our Aging and Veteran Services offices to advertise in the Rocky Mount Telegram and on local TV, plus send a direct mailing to all applicants who have applied for urgent repair or single-family rehab in the past few years, as well as send direct mailings to residents who have completed a housing assistance request at Nash County within the last couple of years. And of course, we'll be taking applicants as they call or walk in any other manner that we can to get a good applicant pool. So the recommendation is to adopt the project budget ordinance, approve the policies subject to amendments recommended by Housing Finance, and authorize the county manager or his designee to execute the documents and reports for administering the program. Are there any questions?
I noticed you said you were, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Okay, let me speak.
You said you were advertising in the Rocky Mount Telegram. Is there some reason why we wouldn't use the other two local papers, businesses that can't live in Rocky Mount, which is probably where the majority of their distribution is?
There's no reason that we couldn't. That will be a county-funded item. Just the Rocky Mount Telegram, we recognize, has much wider distribution than just inside the city of Rocky Mount, but we certainly could advertise in the other two papers.
I'd leave that up to staff to make that decision, but seeing where the other ones have been done throughout the county, which is very widespread, and I'm glad to see that, I think the other ones would come near reaching part of those areas.
Well, didn't we sometime back discuss that?
We discussed it on
we
one given item.
discussed it that we would advertise in all the local papers that cover the county.
I think we did that on one particular item.
Well,
maybe
I thought
rezoning, not-
I didn't understand that way. I thought we made it a
And I'm not sure either, Mr. Chairman.
policy because we had talked about, I think they brought to us talking about email and
Well, yeah, no, we
internet, and we said that many people don't have that, and
Right.
we would use all
Sure.
the papers that cover Nash County.
Yeah, we
Now, it did come up that, about cost and all of that, but I believe the final decision was that we would do it.
we did
Make
it.
sure,
I'm sorry.
to make sure that we covered the county.
We did do it for the budget, and we can do it in this case also.
We did it for all zoning hearings, so we're advertising in all three papers
Yeah,
for any
I think the
rezoning.
zoning was what I recall, but I'm
Well-
certainly not sure of my memory
Well, maybe I'm.
anymore.
We
My-
certainly
My
can do it.
recalling that we did it for anytime we had to advertise a notice to the public, in public hearings or whatever.
All the ones that need it, are they applied for it, or do they just have to go back and get another application or another? admission?
Yes, we're not able to use prior applications, but we are able to notify all prior applicants, which is what we try to do, and they can apply again. We have to actually have a signature with a date that's during this application period. And regarding the advertising, the state does not require newspaper notification, but if we choose to do it, we certainly can do it in all three. It'll just be a local expense that won't be reimbursed.
I think that would be a good change.
Okay. Now we got what we got, two motions. One motion to adopt the budget ordinance.
Can you include it all in one motion, Mr. Chairman? Adopt the ordinance, approve the policies,
And the assistant
authorize the
policy.
execution of the
Well,
document.
it could be. We could consolidate it into one motion that would include both.
So I move for approval of that motion.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second, motion by Commissioner Outlaw, second by Commissioner Barnes. All in favor, you know what you're voting. You're voting on both the assistance policy and the budget ordinance. All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, unanimous.
Thank you.
Brian?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Barely.
We've got the renewal of the franchise agreements with North State Medical, Eastern Medical, and K&L Transports. This would be the first approval. I'll be back in August for the second approval. And all have made application to assist us when we request their assistance, so I need y'all's approval for that.
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Davis, and seconded by Commissioner Morgan. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, budget amendments.
Good afternoon.
No, still more.
It's close
Yeah,
to
you got about 7 minutes.
Okay. The following budget amendments are being presented for the board's consideration for fiscal year 16-17. The first one is for the Aging Department, HCCBG. At the time the budget was adopted, final funding had not been set for the Home Community Care Block Grant. Therefore, amounts from the previous year were used for budgeting. This amendment allocates funds according to the 16-17 HCCBG grant. No county funds are required. And it's just adjusting the different areas within the block grant. The second amendment is related to asset forfeiture funds. This amendment is to budget additional asset forfeiture funds for the replacement of a K-9. Due to the retirement of K-9 Sasha, the Sheriff's Office is requesting a replacement. No county funds are required. It's $14,000.
Any questions on the budget amendments? Not a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Moved by Commissioner Outlaw,
Second.
second by Commissioner Wells. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, unanimous. Thank you. Donna?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to talk about the social work for the blind services that we provide in collaboration with the state of North Carolina. These services are managed and supervised by the state, and the social worker is located at Department of Social Services, and we essentially provide office space and equipment. It's primarily funded by the Social Services Block Grant, and since the 1980s, with a small contracted portion from the Department of Social Services, we contribute about $4,000 to that position for the year. The funding level for this position hasn't changed since the program was initiated about 30 years ago. But as you can imagine, with salary changes and position changes, since the funding hasn't changed, the services have changed throughout the state. Last year, the state found funding to cover the gaps that were identified to continue the state at the level at which they were providing services, but they're concerned that that is not something that they'll be able to do on an ongoing basis. Therefore, this year, they have identified 3 positions that need to be eliminated from the state budget, And unfortunately, one of those was a Nash County position. We had the social worker that was employed to cover that service in December retired, and as a result of her retirement, the state decided to blend Nash and Edgecombe counties together and create one position to cover both counties. They've also done the same thing in another situation when they eliminated a position when an employee retired and they're looking for a third. They're concerned that they won't be able to continue to find funds to continue to support those positions. And the social worker right now is in Nash County 2 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and the first and third Fridays of each month. As you can imagine, the reality of this is you can't provide the same level of service when you have a half-time position that you were providing when you had a full-time position. The previous worker looked through her caseload and she closed people who were managing on their own and didn't require a great deal of assistance and streamlined the caseload to being those that were the most needy. And as a result, the caseload has decreased from about 75 to 50 cases in Nash County that she's covering. So as a result, there's been a reduced number of people she's able to serve, as well as she's had to give up some of the extra things that the blind really look forward to, like day trips. The socialization of those consumers is very important to them, and those things she's had to give up. And there's been some delay in adding new people onto her caseload, and right now she is scheduling intakes out into August. So just to give you a snapshot of what this person does when she adds a new person to her caseload, she does an intake and needs assessment. She assesses their needs for equipment. There are certain types of equipment that are very beneficial to this population. She makes referrals to services in the community that they're able to benefit from. She teaches them how to do daily skills that we take for granted, like how to use the phone, how to use the stove, how to fold clothing, count money, and use devices that can help them see better and be able to manage better in their own homes. She has been able to continue the support group in both Nash and Edgecombe counties, and some of her Nash County clients participate in that support group. Generally, a case is open with her from 6 months to a year. She's required to have quarterly contact with her clients, but she said she generally has monthly phone or face-to-face contact. There is a great need for this service in Nash County, and I would request that the board just write a letter of support to the state to return Nash County to a full-time position that we have enjoyed for probably about 30 years. There are several counties that share a social worker that serve multiple counties, and unfortunately, we're one of those now.
We actually lost a worker, right?
We lost a half of one. We had a full-time, and now that person that was hired to cover Edgecombe, she now covers Edgecombe and Nash. So we have her 2 full days a week and 1 full day every other week.
So while we are talking to the state, what do we do about the services that these people need and are not getting?
She's covering the needs of the most critical ones, and she's very committed and doing the best that she can. And there's been some delay in adding new people on to her caseload. I haven't heard from clients or consumers that have needs that are not being met. She's not shared that with me. But we do have other social workers in our agency that we could try to serve in the interim, but that need hasn't been brought to my attention.
Yeah, I don't know why you haven't heard, because I'm hearing some of that. And certainly if you've got less resources for the need, then some of the need is not being met.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
And that really concerns me.
That would be expensive.
I will agree.
Any further questions?
what could we do to address this need in the short term while we are trying to deal with the state?
Well, I have a,
Which I wouldn't have much
Yeah.
thought that the state would do anything to reverse what they've already done.
my question is, you said the lady from Edgecombe is the one that reduced the caseload over here in Nash. She pruned,
No.
The retiring social worker, she pruned her caseload to leave the most critical, the ones with the most critical needs.
okay, and you say the new person, there's been a delay on adding, why has there been a delay in adding additional cases?
Time, not having the time to add new cases because she's having to serve more people with less of her time.
So 2.5 days a week, basically, over a month period. When she works out of your office.
Yes, she does.
And she is seeing clients constantly? I mean,
She's seeing or communicating with clients constantly because she has a caseload right now of 50 from Nash, and I think her caseload in Edgecombe is very similar to that.
is there a state limit to the caseload?
I don't think there is a state mandate for limiting the caseload.
Okay, to answer your question, Mr. Outlaw, we can write a letter requesting a full-time person being brought aboard. We can fund at the county level. Right now, we're doing 4,000.
Yes.
Even though it was 4,000 full-time and it's still
No,
4,000?
it was about 9
9.
full-time, and now it was reduced to 4 with the halftime.
So the commissioners could vote to provide additional funding to increase the hours. The problem is the employee is already working 40 hours a week, so it would be difficult to, it's almost like you'd have to hire a part-time person to work in the office. So logistically, there might be some, we'd have to deal with the state on what would happen to the one person that's serving both counties. Would we take that person over and pay half the position? And Edgecombe would have to find a half-time person? I mean,
Well, while we sort through all of this, are there people out there that are qualified on a part-time basis to deal with these situations?
I don't know.
There must be.
I mean, if you advertise it, I'm certain that somebody would apply. I feel confident that there are qualified people
I
who are.
just would like to see us meet the needs of the people that have this need. And you've reduced your cases, the lady pruned it down from 75 to 50 or whatever.
Yes.
And you've got new cases you can't put on. So you got the blind people out there who are very vulnerable people that obviously are not getting the services that they need. And they probably are not the type people that would complain about not getting that service.
Probably not.
And I just think we need to do something for those people.
Well, I just, before you got into the discussion, spoke to the county manager, can't we temporarily do? Maybe add some funds where we can get a part-time person, at least temporarily, until maybe, hopefully, we can urge the state.
I mean, this is obviously a need that we had been meeting that has just been slashed.
well, yeah, the question is are those 25 that have been taken off the list, are they still in need of services? And if they've been dealt with by the former employee in a way that's satisfactory to those 25 people, is there a way we can work with the new person to maybe expand first to 55 and then to 60 for the new people that are needed?
I guess the question I would have, if the lady hadn't retired and the state hadn't have done what they did, would the lady have pruned the list down?
Probably not.
That's what I'm
I
thinking.
think there's a
She
great.
did it, she did it out of necessity.
Right, she did.
It sounds like we need to have staff with Ms. Boone get us a lot more facts on what we got, particularly the fact that Nash County lost theirs, what are the other caseloads in the other counties, and were we just picked because somebody retired, or the other counties that maybe didn't have the caseload we got?
Yeah, the question,
I
yeah,
don't know we got all the information we need, but the urgency sounds certainly with this board. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So could we, in a very short period of time, evaluate where we really are? Because, I mean, I hear what she's saying, but I don't have much information here to look at.
I'd like to investigate whether there are counties of 10, 12, 15,000 people that have a full-time.
Right, that's-
Yet we've been
And we-
relegated to a half-time position because we had a retirement.
I actually asked that question, and she said there are some counties that, the smaller counties are, several smaller counties are served by one person.
Right, I'm sure.
And that there are numerous counties that share one worker.
Can we get a list of all the workers across the state and how many counties and
And the caseloads.
and the caseloads, yeah. I mean, it really does sound like, as you said, that we had a retirement and they're trying to cut back, and so even though we're the 30th largest county, we we were cut
Yeah.
out of convenience, it sounds like.
I don't know, for some reason, when government start cutting, they always hit the most vulnerable areas in cutting. And that needs to change. It's not going to change right away, but it needs to be a change that when you're going to cut across the board and not hit the most vulnerable areas with the most vulnerable people. But I think we ought to do something to serve these people
We will,
right now.
we will further investigate it.
And that's good.
Is that something that could come back before this board in terms of a recommendation at our next meeting? Was that too soon? I know
No,
I'm
we could do it,
fairly
we could do it
impatient.
August. We could do it August.
I would hope we
If
can.
it's available.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, if it's available sooner, fine, but it's certainly no later than our August meeting if that can be done.
The outlaw said there's needs there, but we're just not, we're not feeling the needs are there. But we're feeling some wants, but not needs in some places. We should have changed, reversed it back and put where the needs are.
Okay.
Some of it they can.
Okay, can we leave this with the staff and let them bring us a recommendation at our next monthly meeting in August?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Resolution amending the Human Service Department. Rosemary?
Okay. As you will recall, in March of last year, the board by resolution approved the consolidation of Health and Human Services Department. In that new department, we included Health, Social Services, and Aging, and it was effective July 1, 2015. Since that time, we have found some staffing efficiencies in combining our Parks and Recreation and Aging departments into a new Recreation and Senior Services Department. And we've also added full-time Veteran Service Office. And so we are proposing a new resolution for your consideration, and that resolution will do three things. It will remove the Aging Department from the Human Services Department and combine it with Recreation to create a new Recreation and Senior Services Department officially. It will add Veteran Services to the Human Services Department, and it will reduce the number of board members on the Consolidated Human Services Board from 20 to 19, eliminating one public member that we have talked about in the past. Attached to it, you do have a resolution for your consideration. As you know, that department reports to Mr. Bill Hill. He could not be here today, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Just would only mention that the reduction of the public member is a member that actually resigned from the board. So nobody's being put off the board.
That's correct.
I move we replace, could we replace her with something that would be more worthwhile than by just leaving it out now that one we don't have one with that. Is that right?
Replacing, I'm sorry?
The one, that one that's retiring or whatever, was that, we're replacing it, or how we replacing it?
Oh,
Well,
that's a
we-
person, that was
we-
Keith Stone, the sheriff, who decided to go off of the consolidated board. He decided he just has too much going on, so he went off. And so we're leaving that position vacant, and we won't actually be reducing it from the board totally. We won't be filling it at all.
As sheriff, he deals with legal issues involving animal control, and he
Yeah.
felt,
Might be a
That-
bit of a conflict.
yeah, there might be some conflict there, so.
So we still have 19 members on that board, Mr. Morgan. It's still a very large board.
Yeah.
It's not very large for the need that's out there.
Well,
Okay, and if there's no other discussion, I call for a motion to approve the resolution to add veteran services to the Human Service Department.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Wells,
Second.
second by Commissioner Barnes. You've heard that motion to move the veteran services to the Human Service Department. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. The motion carried, and it was unanimous.
okay.
Okay, Rosemary?
The next thing I have are board appointments. In your agenda, we have listed several. The first one is a vacancy on the Need Board of Directors. It will be to fill an unexpired term through 1/31/19, and I have not had any recommendations to me at
Yeah, I
this
was
point.
working on it, but so far, it had, well, I've contacted several people, and I haven't been able to get one. I got one more person in mind that I think would be qualified to go on that board. I'm gonna make contact with.
Okay. The next set of appointments is related to the Tourism Development Authority. We have 3 vacancies. The first one is a public member, and Commissioner Davis is recommending Mr. George Griffin to fill this position. It's a 3-year term. It would expire on June 30th, that should say, 2019. You do have a copy of his application at your place. The second one, I'll just go through them, is another public member for the TDA, and it is a result of a member who has moved out of the area, Mr. Charlie Wells. We need to fill this unexpired term through April 30th, 2017, and Commissioner Davis has recommended Mr. Wayne Murphy, and you do have his application in your agenda packet. And the final one would be a vacancy, which is a collector member through April 30th, 2019. So I've got 2 that you can fill, 1, unless you have somebody for the collector position.
I told the board last month I would have someone today. I have looked extensively, but still have not come up with that person that meets that criteria, but I will keep trying.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Was that the minority position?
Sir?
Was that the minority position that you were working on?
Well, actually, we filled that one the last time with Mr. Williams, if you recall.
Oh, okay.
This one, I'm down, Mr. Chairman, where I'll take anybody that meets the criteria. It's just very hard to get that person filled, because they have to work for a hotel. And I'm just bound and determined, I'm not gonna let them all come from the same chain. I need some diversity in that.
Yeah, I agree.
dispersals. I know which group I need them from, but nobody lives in this area that works for that group so far. I think they got some people they're gonna bring in as residents of Nash County, and it is not a requirement to live here, as we found out, but I just much prefer that they live in Nash County to serve on that board.
Yeah.
But if anybody happens to know anyone that either owns or works at one of our local hotels, and we've got pretty good representation from the 3 areas of hotels, Ben's 301, Gold Rock, and then the big interchange. This person can come from either one, doesn't really particularly matter.
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I'm trying to get
I
someone.
attempted to help you out on that one, and then, I found out that it was a family thing.
Yeah, I'd like to have someone from the group that bought the two hotels, behind, Doubletree, which is the, Residence Inn, and I can't recall the name of the other one, but one group came in and bought those last year. I'm trying to get a person from that particular group. But I'll keep working on it. The other
Okay.
two, one person lives in Nashville, which is Mr. Murphy, and of course, Mr. Griffin lives in the Dorchester community.
Oh, any more recommendations?
No, just for that one, we need a motion for those two, if you're in
All right,
agreement.
ready for a motion for those two recommended appointments to the TDA.
Chairman, move for approval of those two recommendations.
Moved by Commissioner Outlaw. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Wells. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposes, no. The motion carried, and it carried unanimous because Commissioner Morgan stepped out. But anyway,
Yep.
motion carried unanimous.
And we still have the one vacancy on the Human Services Board for the psychiatrist, and I think we're all still looking for that person as well. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, that one's still vacant.
Yes.
Monthly tax report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you know, the report is for informational purposes. I will say that we have enough information before us right now to know that we will exceed the previous year's collections. You know, this report runs a month in arrears, but when we get the final figures, which will include the last month of reporting on the vehicle tax system, I feel like we'll be very pleased with that.
Okay.
But I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Let's move on to the tax reform.
Of course, we just need a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve the tax refund, motion by Commissioner Davis,
Second.
second by Commissioner Outlaw. You've heard that motion. All in favor of it, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposers say no. Motion carried, and it carried unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners report. Any commissioner with any report?
Mr. Chairman, I got one thing that is concerning me somewhat that I'd like to discuss with the board just a little bit, and that's our current hospital owned by Nash County. I still feel like we're not getting enough information. I know I harp on this quite a bit, but I just don't think it's gotten any better. We were told we would be getting a report mid-year and the end of the year from the hospital when we had our kind of a meetings of the mind last year. I don't think we've had that report at all this year, which I really don't understand why we wouldn't get this. I personally, as a commissioner, still feel this is a county-owned hospital, and this board should be updated from time to time on what's going on there. I was also concerned that we got a batch of 5 months' worth of minutes at one time when we used to get them every month. I had asked a member of the hospital board about that a couple of times. I don't know why we finally got all of them. It was an oversight, change in employee, I'm not certain. But still, I think it's probably borderline unexcusable to not get those minutes and for us to be able to read. Of course, I'm real concerned about the financing of it, the fact that this county owns that hospital, and it has in the past been a very good, reliable source of revenue for the county to take care of other needs in that particular health field. Those resources have gone completely away the last 2 or 3 years. I look at other situations throughout the state and hear stories about other county-owned hospitals that still receive sometimes a rather significant amount of income from it. I know in defense of our hospital, I know the healthcare industry has changed quite a bit, and it is very challenging, but yet I still would like to be updated on where we are as a board and understand better why we're not getting any revenue from our very large investment at that site. But the real thing that concerned me and has brought me this morning to making comments about it is in the last couple of weeks, some comments out in the community. I had a lady contact me recently, rather upset because we had sold our hospital. She had had her mother go out there and wasn't real satisfied with some things about what went on, and when she quizzed about it, the nurse that was tending to it told her that, and I asked her to repeat this about 3 times, the exact wording. The nurse, which was an employee of the hospital, told her that things had changed significantly since the Board of Commissioners sold the hospital. And it bothers me that our employees out there are not better schooled about where we actually are. And then this past Friday, I happened to be in Raleigh, was made to go to the farmer's market, and I don't mean that derogatory at all. I enjoyed it, quite frankly, but something my wife loves to do. But I ran into a male nurse that used to be a neighbor of mine, and asked him how things were going at the hospital, having had the other conversation the week before, and he said, well, Mr. Davis, I'll tell you, they've changed a lot since y'all decided to sell the hospital. And I told him, I said, well, we haven't sold the hospital. He quizzed me, are you sure you haven't sold it? Because that's what we've been told. I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure we haven't sold it. But, you know, I just don't think we should have employees out there that feel like we have sold that hospital, because unless it's been done, and I don't know it, maybe well, I haven't. I've been on this board 14 years, I've never missed a meeting yet. So it hasn't happened, I don't think.
They can't sell it without.
I understand that, but we're doing a very poor job of letting at least the employees out there know where we are.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, they spending money right and left.
Yeah, and I brought to the attention of this board a little while back about some openings coming up on that board in December, and actually, I reviewed that again last night, and it's only one that doesn't have a member that can be reappointed, and we normally reappoint members out there. I did look at attendance records, and we got some people that don't go to the meetings much, which always bothers me. Actually, some new members that have missed more than 50% of the meeting, and I'm not here to call out names by any means, but when you review those reports, you can see who's there and who's not there. But if it's legal, I'd like for us to seriously consider putting a member of this board back on the hospital board. We had that for many years. I think, Mr. Belfield, during your term, not during mine, because I think the last one was a gentleman that I replaced on this board, Mr. Stewart, I believe served on it for a number of years. I don't know if we can legally do that. I'd like to request that be looked into, and this board certainly not make a decision today, but consider that. I don't know who that person would be. I think, even though I hadn't discussed it with her, Ms. Barnes, with her involvement in the healthcare board, would be a good fit, because they are certainly intertwined quite a bit, but certainly that would be a board decision if we decided we indeed would want to put someone on there. And I hope we'll seriously consider that, see if it's legal for us to do that. I don't think it would be received very well, but at the rate of reporting and et cetera, that we're getting out of the board, I just believe it's a necessity that we consider that. And with that said, that's kind of my public comment for this morning. I apologize for bringing it up.
I would just kind of piggyback on that a little bit. I'm getting, or have received some calls regarding the funding stream from the hospital. What is the county, what is the funding that comes from the hospital to the county? And I'm hearing these rumors about the hospital being sold, and those things should concern all of us.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, they can't sell it without.
Well, I realize that, but the people out there don't realize that.
Yeah, but I guess those rumors are being, people being told that, I guess, for a reason, but we can straighten that out.
Well, at minimum, every employee out there
you,
should know the ownership of that hospital, at bare minimum.
Right. And that's the reason they went with UNC.
Right.
To prevent of getting into the situation where we would. In fact, at the time when it was done, I met with the chair of the board.
Sure. I think they met with us as a board several times.
Yeah.
I missed
one thing I watch the attendance too, and when I see one that's not good, I get in touch with them. Hey, now, do you need to be replaced? If you can't attend the meetings, you have a conflict that you can't attend. And I get in touch with you, and there's one on there now I got.
Right. I missed one point of my notes, and I apologize for going back, but in those minutes dated April the 7th, it may not be what I take it to mean, but in the second paragraph, when they're dealing with the chief financial officer, which apparently, did the one we have retire, or was he going to be replaced? Or I know the one that we had for many years is recently not there anymore.
He left, and they had a temporary that was serving 2 hospitals. And I understand he's going to become the permanent. That's what we've been told.
What it reads, it looks like, and I hope I'm wrong, it looks like he will be an employee of UNC rather than our hospital. And, right now, we only have Mr. Tuning, an employee of UNC, which, if you recall, when we negotiated all this, I didn't really like that either and questioned it quite a bit. But I certainly would not want the chief financial officer out there an employee of UNC and not Nash General Hospital. And maybe that's not what that says, but it looks like it says that to me. If we could just get a clarification on that, maybe through Vince and the hospital attorney, or the best way to get it.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to this occasion right here pretty good right now, I think.
Okay.
Because this thing has, people don't realize this hospital belongs to Nash County.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of them do, but
A lot of them
some,
don't. No,
but some have gotten their impression now that it has been sold since they
haven't
brought
done the homework.
UNC in.
And this county has owned this hospital for, I mean, how many years? 14, 15, 20 years, whatever.
More than that.
More than that.
More than that, that's
Better
just the
say
start.
50.
But look,
More like 50.
and they hadn't never had a problem with payment and nothing. It's made money every year until this year.
Well, until 2 years ago.
Well, it's been a couple of years.
And that's not a good sign from when we paid all the bills, and that county, the office that we have over in Nash County was paid for out of the funds from this hospital.
Well, partial defense of the hospital is they're getting a flood. People that don't have insurance, doctor's offices are not serving them. They're just refusing. They're not serving them. If you don't have the money, and if you don't have health insurance, and they're telling them, you need to go to the emergency room. And then if they don't have insurance there, then they got to, they got to at least give them minimum treatment. And that's expensive.
That should not be minimum treatment or nothing, but it should be the best they could do.
Well, They have to treat them, I put it that way. And you know, if no funds coming in, it's not gonna be the very, very best. So that's one situation that all hospitals are facing now. Emergency room is crowded. I went there not too long ago, and it was full, people waiting, and they tell me it's like that just about every day. Anyone else, commissioners have, before I call on the county manager?
Well, I can incorporate the response in my report.
Okay, we'll listen to you now.
Okay, just briefly touching on the hospital. 2 years ago, I guess it was calendar year 14, was their year, and we had budgeted about $400,000, and they indicated they had lost, I guess in the press it was 8 million or something to that effect, and
That's what it said, 8 million.
yeah, so we didn't get anything, and then they went to a 6-month year to get on a fiscal year like the county. We were told we'd get 100,000. We didn't receive anything. We budgeted 100 for this coming year. If you look at the history, 2010 we got 1.16 million. 2011, 1.22 million, 2012, 264,000, 2013, 716, 2014, 362, and then it's zeroed out since then. What happened was, for some reason, on January 1, 2012, there was a new agreement between the county and the hospital that there was no longer a guaranteed minimum, if there ever was, but it was 4.5% of the net income. And so when the year they went with UNC Healthcare, conversion costs or something occurred where they lost that 8 million, and 4.5% of a negative number is zero. So that's why we are not getting anything. I do know from personal experience that other counties with hospitals, county-owned hospitals, which are owned by the taxpayers, and it's arguable the taxpayers should get a dividend from that investment, are making $2, $3, $4 million a year guaranteed for 20, 30, 40 years from their hospital. And I really think this agreement that was entered into in 2012, January of 2012, must have been negotiated in 2011, is not favorable to the county and to the taxpayers of the county. And I think it would be good to look at that again. And according to the county attorney, I believe he told me that they amend it when they have to do new debt.
We have done it several times when they issued bonds, because the bond agency generally wants a lease equal to the length of the bonds.
Yeah, right. And so that's why it was apparently
And we
done.
did have a guaranteed minimum at one time, unless my memory fails me bad, because I had to sign one of these during my term as chairman.
Right.
I'm almost positive we had a minimum in there then. It wasn't a large amount, but I believe we had a minimum in there.
Well, now there is no guaranteed minimum. It's simply 4.5% of the net income. And I just don't believe that is very favorable to the county, and I would think that we would want to address that again. If they're willing to. I mean, we've got an agreement.
We probably need to take one step at a time.
Yeah. The other issue about board appointments, it is amazing the fact that these board appointments to that board their board basically recommends to us
Right.
who to appoint to their board.
Right.
And, which to me would seem like the county manager, if there's a vacancy, on this board, recommending to y'all who to appoint as a new county, to be my boss. And so the whole.
You ain't gonna try that, are you?
No. So the whole process doesn't really make sense. To me, it would seem like there would be some independence by this board. I do believe there are statutes, though, that set forth this procedure
It is, but.
across the state. Yeah,
It
yeah.
is a general statute, but if we choose to get involved, we've had success in the past, but if we don't choose to, we don't get
You don't get fired a tree.
looked after.
And both Bertie and Chowan, they had an agreement like this with Vidant. And there were members of the county commissioner that would be recommended by their board to the county commissioners. And one time there was an absence of a county commissioner. That was an issue, and the next time they had appointments, they recommended a county commissioner to go back on their board. So there's no prohibition under the statutes. I don't know about any kind of side agreement or any kind of addendum that we might have done.
Well, now, we've got a statute for Nash General only, so we got to check that given statute. And Vince may already know that it's not.
I'm pretty sure that a board member can go on it, but I want to double check.
Right, I want to, because I know you used to could, because we had one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been 15 years.
So we can certainly investigate that, and in December, if there is an opening coming up,
It is.
talk to the folks out at the hospital about.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to let them know ahead of
That
time,
possibility.
what we're thinking, if this board agrees to it.
You should have.
Regarding the untimeliness, there was a changeover in the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. As I said, there's a guy appointed on an interim basis that was doing it for UNC at 2 different locations.
Right.
I understand that person is going to get the appointment here to be the full-time CFO. During the interim between the former CFO leaving, there was just an administrative breakdown. The minutes were accumulating. They were available for us, but the staff apparently did not realize that they were to send it to us on a monthly basis. And I know Donna kept contacting them, wanting to know, are we going to get that 100,000 this year? We'd been assured that we would get 90 to 100,000 or 90,000 by the former CFO for that 6-month year, where they went from a calendar year to a fiscal year like the county's on. And they had a one-time 6-month year. But we could never get word back over several months. But in the last, I guess, week or two, there has been communication between you and the new interim. He still hadn't. She has repeatedly sent emails requesting information, and she did get from their administrative assistant those minutes that were put in your boxes. But they were being generated. They just weren't being sent over to us, and I don't think that'll happen again. We'll start getting them on a monthly basis.
Well, the part about the chief financial officer now, I want us to look in that real quick, because
Absolutely.
I don't know that our agreement with them is gonna allow them to use an employee of UNC.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, at the time we signed that agreement, it can only be Mr. Chunion's job.
Yeah, again, that agreement, talking to several of y'all, there was an expectation by some that there was still a minimum that we were supposed to get.
Well, that was me. You give me a copy of the latest.
Yeah,
I see
yeah.
that it's not in there anymore.
Yeah, it was taken out, and that might have been because with a $100 million fund balance, it was felt that they were making a lot of money and 4.5% would be good, but,
I wish we still had the minimum.
yeah, I mean, I think we should still have a guaranteed minimum. So, we can look into those issues and, but,
That chief financial deal, check on that quick as you can.
We
Sound
will.
like That train might have
That
done
thing
left
ran
the
out in a
station.
minute.
yeah. I mean, it's no doubt that it's a very excellent hospital, and
Absolutely.
as the chairman says, healthcare reform and everything has put strains on hospitals and reimbursements and,
Rain on all of them,
yeah, and,
That's what I say, on all of them.
including this county.
but the taxpayers do have an asset there that, they should be getting, even if it's de minimis, should get some kind of dividend, from that ownership. But we'll look into those issues.
You plan to reach out to Nash Health and kind of make them aware of this discussion today? You probably want to do that.
Yeah, I'll be
this
glad
afternoon.
to. Again, I've had, and Ms. Wood and I have spoken for 2 or 3 months, and she has sent emails trying to get that financial information, whether we were going to get that 100,000 that was indicated to us that we budgeted for in 15-16. But there's been a breakdown in communication. And
This afternoon, you can.
so I will contact the CEO, yes.
Well, the real large issue, the money's one thing, which, $100,000, but the real issue is lack of communication with this board, and the fact that it is a county-owned hospital, and their employees do not know that.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the changeover to UNC might have caused part of that misconception, that somehow UNC had acquired the hospital, and it's now part of UNC, but of course, that's not correct, so.
Well, actually, it went through a period, they went with UNC, so we can get in a position where you'd be talking about somebody want to buy the hospital, or somebody, or it come up, we're in such a big debt, we need to sell it. And that was the idea in the beginning. In my involvement with, that did not happen.
That might have been a concern that the county would sell that hospital, but I do know that many county hospitals have associated with larger hospitals, whether it's private or UNC or East Carolina, as for various reasons. So, but we will look into that. Just a couple other things.
Give that one, that's an important one, sure enough. Don't leave it off the board.
The
Hospital.
hospital, I will do so. She couldn't be here today. She had a previously scheduled vacation, but Miss Sandy Hall has been named the new Cooperative Extension Director effective July 1. We'll have her at the next meeting to fully introduce y'all. Y'all know her, of course, but we'll have her at the next meeting.
That was a great thing.
Yeah. And couldn't we also prepare a resolution related to her retirement, thanking her for her service?
No, she's the new
Thank you, Chairman.
Sandy Hall. Sandy Hall.
Okay, Sandy Hall is the new one.
Yeah,
I was
she's
thinking
the
about
new cooperative.
And then one that just retired. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have her at our next meeting. It'll be
Okay.
fine.
Just, we do believe that we ended up in the black, and just a few things, as the tax administrator said, tax collection percentage is around 98.4%. 4.5, 4.6, maybe 4.7, almost 98.5, highest in the history of the county. Real property collections, highest in the history of the county. Personal property, highest that we can find. Ambulance fees this year were as high. We've still got one more month, but we're been averaging doing at least 300 a month, and we're if we do 300, we'll be 100,000 over last year. So it appears that ambulance fees will be the highest we've ever collected. Sales tax were the highest we've ever collected. So those revenues, which are ad valorem taxes and sales taxes and ambulance fees at about $4 million, those are really our highest collections other than intergovernmental transfers for health and human services from the state. So the tax office has done a great job, and finance tracking all this. The county is doing well collecting their revenues. The courthouse project is moving along. We're still on track to accept bids on the project on September 8th. The EMS building in Nashville is nearing completion. We expect to be finished by the end of July and hope to move in mid-August. We'll have a ribbon cutting for the move-in. Home Health has gotten a permission to move into the part of the East Point building that was formerly rented to hospice and the hospital. That, of course, was necessitated by the new courthouse that addition that we're planning to do, and the current location of Home Health will be demolished. But we are in there making repairs, renovations, and expect to move in there the next week, the week of 11th through 15th. The 97 sewer projects, approximately 95% complete. We hope to have it operational, the sewer line operational by mid-August. The storage building at the corner of Church and Body Streets that we traded to the town will be demolished this month in July. I've contacted the superintendent about an implementation committee regarding the new statute that was the school bill that passed, he and I have communicated, and I know he had wanted it to come from the board, and so the chairman has contacted their chairman. So we will start trying to look at implementing that new statute over a several-year period. Things like we found several things that need to be corrected in calculating the gap funding and also the cost estimates over the next 5-6 years in the name change. June was a very productive month. We got the budget passed, and most importantly, we got the school legislation issue that had been before us for about 18 months. There was a compromise, and I want to say to this board and also to all the legislators who were on both sides of this issue and the 7 commissioners here that it's a great example of people, not a single person in that legislation got everything they wanted. Everybody was willing to compromise, and the 7 of y'all came together, and all the legislators came together and were able to compromise, and so we got a bill. it's settled, and again, it's just great that the seven of y'all could come together and agree on that very important legislation. And I think you're all ready to get it behind you, and with that compromising spirit, we've done that. And again, y'all deserve a lot of congratulations on being able to come together. People tried to divide y'all for the last year, and in the end, y'all all came together, and that was very important.
Got something no other county has, 10 years.
And the 10-year without lawsuits, the whole issue over the last year has exemplified why this county in particular needed such relief. Because as I've said, structurally we were the weakest county in North Carolina, because we're the only county that has another county joining with a city and another county school board and our school board to oppose our county commissioners. I mean, Edgecombe doesn't have another county government joining with their school board to oppose their county. So if any county in North Carolina, and we are the only county school system that serves students in another county to the extent that we do, we needed that relief. And that 10 years means a lot, and it'll allow us to now focus not on battles, turf battles, things like that, but meeting their construction needs as we look into the next 5 or 10 years. And several of y'all have indicated that to me. So good job, and again, great job on coming together as a board unanimously, and again, the legislators that did. It was unanimously voted for in the General Assembly, both houses, and those that did just it's a great testament to this board. Thank you.
If I might say one thing, we need to evaluate what we do rather than say, well, we'll take this. We don't need to take it all and just say, well, I'll take it all because it's got some in my hand. But we need to evaluate it fully before we take it, or I'll take it out there and you're going to have, excuse me, Ms. Davis, go ahead.
I'm trying to get the chairman's attention.
Well, as a government entity and working with other government entities, there should be some compromise where everybody gets something. And in this case, we did. But when you look at it, Nash County got everything that it asked for, with the exception of the split.
But that was the fifth compromise, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
We got a delayed,
Upset about it.
a delayed phase-in rather than.
oh, sure. Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
But that was the big thing.
I got a question to the matter. Did we need to take
Yeah.
any action on this item about the pre-qualification?
That's
Closed
closed
Oh, I'm
session.
sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, I'm ready for a motion that we go into closed session for economic development, discussions with our attorney, and
Lisa made-
moved by Commissioner Barnes, seconded by Commissioner Wells, that we go into closed session. All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. And opposers say no. And motion carried, unanimous. We're now ready for closed session.